Hello, everybody. This is Leticia coming to you this Thursday with another edition of my weekly Money Matters webinars. And as announced a bit earlier today, for today's webinar, we're going to be once again delving into the world of cryptocurrencies, and we'll be discussing the issue of cryptocurrencies and privacy. And joining me today is our guest Nacho, who also goes by the name CoinSureNZ on Twitter. Nacho is a longtime crypto investor, enthusiast, and developer in the Bitcoin space, and he's also spoken at a number of crypto-related conferences. Unfortunately, we're having a bit of trouble with his camera, so it looks like he'll only be able to join us via audio today. In any case, thank you so much, Nacho, for joining us. You're somebody I recently had a chance to connect with in the crypto community here in Playa del Carmen. And I could tell just from speaking with you that you knew what you were talking about in the world of crypto. And so, the crypto space is something many people are curious to get started with. But at the same time, there are also all these rumors about the fact that, well, cryptocurrencies are no better because they'll be able, the powers not to be will be able to see your every move. So many people are legitimately concerned about the issue of privacy. And I know this is something you recently spoke about at a crypto event. So thanks again for joining us today, first of all.
No problems. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So before we get into today's topic, I was wondering if perhaps you could tell our audience a little bit about, what your connection to the space is, and perhaps, why you are passionate about, the world of cryptocurrency and what you feel it can do for us moving forward.
I first got involved in the space in 2014. What interests me in kind of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies was my previous work. I spent 10 years working in the police, and so how I came across Bitcoin was the Silk Road trial and the aftermath of the darknet markets there, where drugs and other things were being bought online with Bitcoin. And so to me, it was interesting initially just that could kind of go on for as long as it went on, and there was nothing they could do about it. It was happening right in front of their face, and they couldn't really stop it. And so to me, I don't think as many people are quite the same way I did about it. That really was quite a significant thing to, knowing what I know about that world, and that it was happening like it was, and they couldn't do anything about it. Immediately made me think, well, this is a very significant kind of political development, if you like. So I started, went along and looked in a lot of those kind of markets around the time, and of course started reading about Bitcoin because that was part of the thing there. And as soon as I understood like what this was really about, then they kind of went the rest of my life of, I got really fascinated by the space, and to me it was very obvious that this is going to be something that is fundamentally change the world. And since that time, it's certainly grown quite a lot, but I believe there's a lot more to grow with it. But very much like you said, and I guess it's hopefully what we're going to talk about today is what way that goes and how it's used, and the promises of, for example, what I saw were those kind of darknet markets in those days. It's very much dependent on how you as a user use it and the attitudes that you have towards it. And a lot of people have this attitude that if you're using Bitcoin or whatever, then it's anonymous, and that's very untrue. But at the same time, if used correctly, it can be very true. But a lot of people don't understand the subtleties to that. So
that's interesting. So I think even before we speak about Bitcoin, a lot of people, especially people who are in the freedom movement, they've come to be concerned about this increasing push for the digitization of, what we know as money, which up until now has been, fiat currencies, the Canadian dollar, the US dollar. More and more places are saying, no cash accepted. And of course, this has all been under the excuse, we could say, of the, current health scare. So I guess, is there, we know that there's a push by the same creators of fiat currencies, the central bankers. There's now, it seems, a push towards moving towards digital currencies. And many people are concerned about that. They're concerned that my every move could potentially be seen, especially in a cashless society. So is there another side of this coin? For people who maybe don't know enough about the space, can cryptocurrencies actually offer more privacy than what we've had under the existing system, and potentially, as we move forward into this digital currency world, are there ways for us to still maintain our privacy, now in this digital currency world? I hope I make myself understood.
Yeah. I mean, I think the answer is fundamentally yes, they do offer a chance for more privacy, but that comes with many caveats. So very much like you said, I think the powers that be, if you like, are pushing for digitalization and to move away as much as possible to a cashless economy, and one where all transactions are electronic. And where this is going to go in the future, we can't say for certain, but one potential outcome is that all your transactions are conducted on this digital central bank digital currency. So everything's got to be paid through their app or a connected app, and this is not dissimilar to what happens today in China with WeChat, and they're already testing out with the central bank digital currency. But what that world means potentially, and again, how this pans out and whether this happens is all very much up in the air. But the potential future in that one there is that all transactions must be conducted on this digital central bank digital currency. So you can't pay for anything without it, and anything else would be illegal, and they'd ban cash. So unless I'm trading you, I don't know, seashells or gold. I mean, I guess something you can't use or whatever. But I couldn't, for example, pay you online with dollars or anything, or PayPal or anything other than the central bank digital currency, right? Which would discourage people from using any other sort of means of transacting. So what that would mean is that if they ran that, they could surveil every single transaction. They would know every transaction that you ever made. They could watch that in real time, but also because they control the ledger, they could censor or controlling your transaction. So, for example, if you tried to pay, let's say there's a political newsletter that cost you $1 to read that is distasteful to the authorities in question, they could offer the payment link, and you just click it, and it wouldn't happen. It'd say payment failed or something like that. Payment failed. And maybe if they saw you making other transactions which were questionable, they could freeze your account, and that would mean that you couldn't go to the grocery store, you couldn't pay anything because your account is frozen, and they could just switch it on and off. Another potential consequence of that is they could deduct your taxes directly from your account or on sale. So for example, you can't.
Very scary scenarios.
Very scary scenarios. Yeah. But the other world that you've got to think about this is how that also connects into many other data points. So, for example, one thing I think is certain in the future is, so let's imagine that you've got Letitia and Letitia's twin Ritisha, right? So two of you are exactly the same, right? Now, you've got exactly the same DNA, you're almost the same, but you live two different lifestyles. So Letitia lives a very healthy lifestyle and goes to the gym all the time and eats very clean food. And
the other one, no, just kidding.
and lives in a very upstanding way, and only says nice things about the government and everyone else. Now, Ritisha, she goes to the bar very frequently, spends a lot of money on alcohol and unhealthy food. Says things that are very unbecoming of the government or whatever it might be. Now, if I could see the payment details of these two people, and imagine I'm offering health insurance for a start, who do you think that you would charge more? The good one, in quotation marks, good one, or the bad one? So what you'd find is likely that the both of you would go and apply for health insurance, let's say, and you're more or less the same person, right? But one mysteriously gets quoted a much higher price, and that's because they've been able to view all this payment information. They've put it through some algorithm that says this person is high risk or low risk or whatever it may be, and so they just magically get this different rate, right? And you can't see it; it's all happening behind closed doors on their servers. But this is what's being done now. I think that is absolutely 100% certain in the future, because you think about, let's just stick with health insurance. every incentive is there for them to use a system like this, because imagine if you were able to do this with high accuracy. It just makes sense that if you're the health provider, the health insurance provider that does this and versus the one that doesn't, you're going to make more money because you're more accurately going to be able to estimate which customers are high risk and charge them a more appropriate fee, right?
So it's actually very interesting that you're saying this, Nacho, because I actually come from a health insurance background. Like I was, so I can tell you that at least one of the companies in Canada, Manulife, has introduced a plan that would essentially reward people for living a healthier lifestyle. Now, it required a lot of participation from the applicant. You had to literally log into their application, their website, and track how many times, or you have to use a Fitbit. It actually required active participation of you as the insured person to prove that you were living this healthier lifestyle. And so as long as you could prove that you were living this healthier lifestyle, they would honor lower rates for you versus somebody else, right? But it required some active management on your part. But what we're talking about here is sort of like the reverse situation whereby even unbeknownst to you, this information that you are disclosing through your financial transactions could be used against you.
Exactly. And I think it's absolutely certain that it will, because again, if you just take the health insurance example, all the financial incentives are there for them to do that, and you can have all the privacy laws and things you like, but the money is stacked such in a way where they will find a way to get around it or whatever, because the company that does is the one that's going to destroy the competitors in the open marketplace, right? So, that's just one example of data privacy and what that can mean for your life. But when it comes to your transactions, that's a whole nother matter. And also the ability for that to control your ability to actually spend, or perhaps what prices you pay for things, is a whole nother matter. And this is already happening in China with their social credit system to some degree. But the point I'm trying to make with the health insurance is you can see why you can say it's bad or whatever as much as you like, but it's just pure mathematics and economics that if you do this stuff, you're going to be more profitable, and you're going to beat all the other businesses. So I think it's certain that we move in that direction to some degree. How much laws or other things or consumer behavior affects it, I don't know, but it's certain that we will. So I think that when coming back to digital payments, that if you talk about that idea about, as a health insurance provider, I can reduce my costs by using database intelligence to do that. It's the same thing for a government department of, I can reduce crime by identifying high risk people and doing things that reduce their behavior. And they may not be things like you see someone buying something which is illegal or borderline illegal and stopping their payments. It may be that this person has been identified as someone where I add all this data together that's likely to commit antisocial behavior. So I do certain things that reduce their ability to purchase alcohol, let's say, for example, because, that's going to reduce their chances of engaging in antisocial behavior. And this is already kind of what government does, right? This is what laws are all about, is trying to engineer people's behavior in a way which is going to achieve an outcome. But nothing is going to be as effective as being able to specifically control how much and how and when and people use their money, right? Economic activity is a big driver of society. So I think for all those reasons, you can just look at this and say it's inevitable that we will move to a world where more of this will happen. And again, whether it's this Orwellian future, like I talked about before, we can't say for certain, but I think it's going to happen to some degree. And there's every incentive for a government to try and make this work, because it just gives them more control over all these things.
It sounds very much, sorry for interrupting, Nacho, but this seems so much against, basic human rights. But I mean, you and I both know, like in this past year or so, since this whole emergency situation has been installed all over the world, they have had the best excuse in the world to be, increasingly stepping over human rights and basic human freedoms. Yes, so, as much as I'd like to think, this couldn't happen, so much has been happening that in a free and democratic society should have never happened, and some of us question it more than others, no doubt about it. So, I mean, the possibilities of what, this sort of system of surveillance could entail are pretty scary, and you've touched on some of them. I guess my question is, how can we defend ourselves, and is there room in the cryptocurrency space for us to protect, ward against these sort of measures, and perhaps have alternatives to, I don't know if we want to say alternatives to these central bank issued digital currencies, or even alternatives in terms of how we can transact with each other, especially once we get into this cashless society. What if paper money stops being accepted, in more and more places? Then what are we left with? What can we do, as people who value our privacy and want to maintain our freedoms as much as possible?
Well, I mean, I think that in this world that we're talking about, that even if they were to make any paper money illegal and you had to use the payment apps, this is not a new phenomena, right? This is the same thing that's happened all throughout history, where they've tried to do the same thing with like the Roman denarium or any of these other currencies that have been used over time. So this is nothing that's new. Even if you look at something more recent, like for example, what's happening in Venezuela, or what's happened in places like Greece and Iran and Turkey, with this hyperinflation happening, people trade other things, right? I could trade you I don't know, I grow rice and you need to eat. So, and you clean my house, for example, we can do a trade, right? But the whole idea of money is that we're talking about barter there. Money kind of gets rid of that problem of the what's the word I'm looking for?
Evaluating the value of something.
It's that, but also the coincidence of wants. That's the word I'm looking for. Where if you don't want the rice or I don't want the cleaning, it's hard to trade, right? But people do this where they buy, like for example, I think in Greece, where the money was developing, a lot of people would buy a car or a refrigerator or things like that, where that had relatively common resale value, but would hold the value greater than dollars. So the point I'm making is that even in that world, like some sort of barter will go on, the real power of that digital currency is A, make it more difficult for people to transact in that way. B, in the world we live in today, a lot of stuff happens electronically, and it's difficult for me to pay you with a refrigerator when you're in Africa and I'm in Mexico or something like that, right? So that's the main issue. Now, when it comes to cryptocurrencies, now those things can be 100% accepted for payment, but what is really missing in the world today? I mean, it exists to some degree, but what needs to be developed more is what's called the circular economy, right? So in a world where circular economy.
Circular economy, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in a world where I get paid in Bitcoin, and then I pay my rent and my food with Bitcoin, and then I then go and pay my gym instructor or something with Bitcoin, and then they take that Bitcoin and they pay with it, and then they pay the other people, right? In that world where I can at least eat and sleep off Bitcoin, the government can do whatever they like. You can put whatever system you want in place, because in that world, you don't need the dollars to exist. That whole thing exists on Bitcoin, right? And so Bitcoin in and of itself is not unstoppable, not impossible to stop, but I think more, for all intents and purposes, more or less it is, right? So the promise of cryptocurrencies when it comes to censorship resistance and kind of free commerce is there's a couple of things that need to be in place. And one of them is that idea of a circular economy. So it needs to be, and like you as an individual, one thing that you can do is wherever possible pay with Bitcoin and accept Bitcoin for your services or anything. Is trying to avoid using fiat currency as much as you can and use crypto whenever possible, simply to try and create that circular economy. And that's what it needs, because the problem with the world today is that by and large, not everyone, of course, but by and large, most people, they want to sell it for dollars, right? And they're into getting Bitcoin or whatever because their whole idea is that they want to sell it for more dollars. And that creates the whole problem. That is the real issue that we have with the ecosystem today when it comes to freedom, is that people are expecting this to be a way to kind of increase their holdings in the fiat system, if you like. And if you never opt out of that system, then they control you, right? Because if you're going to use their money for me to turn Bitcoin into dollars, generally speaking, I have to go through somewhere like Coinbase or an exchange or something like that. I have to provide my ID and my KYC information, so they know who this is, they know where it's come from. But also that exchange, which has happened many, many times, they can say, well, actually, we're not going to send you this money. We need more information. We believe you're a suspect person, whatever it is. So that's not permissionless peer-to-peer cash, which is what Bitcoin is, supposed to be, amongst other things, right? And so if you are going through a third party like Coinbase or whatever, then it is not it's no different than stocks or regular dollars or PayPal, Venmo, or any of these things there. So it needs to be crypto to crypto, crypto with no like dollars in the middle or no middleman, and that's the whole thing, the way this thing was designed. But unfortunately, what that means is education, right? You need to understand how this thing works. You need to be able to use it yourself, and for a lot of people, that there's a bit of a technical barrier there, or a bit of learning required, and people for generally speaking, it's the same fault that we have many things in the world today, where on the one hand you have something like this where you can have more freedom, and on the other hand you got something which is convenient and easy, and unfortunately most human beings will choose convenience at the cost of their freedom, right? So it can solve that problem, but the two things really that you need to have in place are a circular economy whereby to find and to choose to do business with people who will accept this. So you've got a restaurant, two restaurants next to your house, one takes dollars and maybe you like it a little bit more, and the other one takes Bitcoin. Support the one with Bitcoin, pay them in Bitcoin, feed the circular economy, right? Because without it, they think, well, no one uses Bitcoin, they stop accepting it, and then this thing never gets the traction to get off the ground, and you can never escape the system and opt out of it. The other one is to do your research and increase your kind of self-sovereignty, if you like, about your ability to use Bitcoin without Coinbase or without these other third parties, which, make it easy for you. And for a lot of people, this can be a little bit of a steep learning curve to get your head around this kind of stuff. You're not particularly computer savvy, but the whole idea of this is to be able to use something which doesn't require a third party. And unfortunately, a lot of people have a bit of a skewed idea of what that actually means in reality.
So yeah, I'm actually, I have had a number of sessions of Money Matters about the crypto world, and we talked about what exchanges are. But I'm wondering, if we're not going to be using exchanges, because that's the way most people even get into the crypto space, are you then speaking about potentially buying Bitcoin from a private buyer, for example, when you first enter the space? Would that be, from a private seller, would that be a way to avoid using a third party?
Yeah, so there's 100%, I believe, and I think that wherever possible, you should buy Bitcoin with cash from other peer-to-peer from other people rather than from a third entity. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the privacy thing, right? If I'm buying almost every business because of know your customer and any money laundering laws, if you are turning dollars into Bitcoin to go through that process, right? And regardless of what they think about it, they just can't run a legal business without that, because that's the government regulations. So that creates the one issue of there is a record somewhere saying that you own this amount of Bitcoin and that you bought it and that this is where it is. Now, if you buy that on Coinbase and then you withdraw it to your own self-sovereign wallet, now they can't really stop that or control that once it's left Coinbase or wherever it is, but they do know that you had this amount of Bitcoin, and they would know that it went to this address, which doesn't stop you transacting, but does mean that they have a record of it, and they could potentially follow your transactions and whatever you do from there on. So that's one part of it. Is buying it with cash is important for you, for the privacy of just having the basic privacy of, in my opinion, it's no one's business how much money you have or where you have it or whatever. And if you are buying off one of these parties where you've ID'd yourself, then really, they have that information and they know it. And unfortunately, there's no real way for many legal businesses to do otherwise, and that's just the reality of the world we live in. But the way that you can get around that is buying peer-to-peer in person from someone. And there's three ways that I'd suggest to do that. So the first one is to go to a meetup or a crypto group regularly and just meet people in person. network, get to know some people, and you will likely, meet other people there. Might take a bit of time. It's something that can be like, if you don't know any people, it's a little scary going to a new place, with new people and all that. But that's the easiest and the best way, is to meet people in person in a safe environment, of course, and not with more money than you should have in your wallet at one time. But meet with these people and give them cash for Bitcoin and do a trade like that.
Yeah.
The other two options I really recommend are one is an application that you download on your computer and on your desktop, and that's called a BISC. So what BISC is a decentralized marketplace. So it's like Bitcoin in that it's a peer-to-peer piece of app. It's not run on any server. It's only run on the computers of the people that are running the software.
Is it called BISC? D-E-S-K?
B-I-S-Q.
BISC. B-I-S. B as in Bob, I-S-Q? Okay.
I-S-Q. B for Bob, I for India, S for Sierra, Q for Quebec. Yep.
Okay.
So BISC is a software, and again, it runs on your computer like Bitcoin, where that is communicating in a peer-to-peer manner with other computers. And so no one is actually running it apart from everyone who's running it, but there's no company or anything that's responsible. So it's unstoppable in the same way that Bitcoin is. And what BISC does is basically it's an order book that lets you, match buyers and sellers with Bitcoin. And you can put whatever you like payment method on there. So you could meet up in person. You could put a bank transfer with your bank details. You can do Venmo or anything you like. You can put on there. And how BISC works is that I've got the Bitcoin, and so I send it to a wallet that's created in BISC. And the way that BISC works is that connects you to the seller and also to a third party who is another person running BISC. And so it's held in what's called escrow. So that money is sent there. The other person, so let's say we're doing a bank transfer of this, right? And so I accept their offer, they get the message, I transfer the money to them, they click the money's received, and then that releases the Bitcoin that I have transferred there out to the person. So that means that I can't cheat them by them paying me the money into my bank account, and then I just never send them the Bitcoin. Because if I do, then, and you say, well, I never got the money, then it never gets released back to me, right? And so that's the third party is acting as an intermediary where there's any disputes or whatever, then this person can step in and be the middleman between each. There's any discussion, right? So basically, it just uses escrow as a way where we can connect in a secure way where the Bitcoins are sent to a what's called a multi-sig wallet, which is not controlled by any one person. It just simply needs two signatures to unlock it. So you want to buy some Bitcoin from me, and so you send me some dollars. I send the Bitcoin to the wallet. Now, if I take your dollars and run away, you click, hey, this person never sent the money and it's just lost. I can't get my Bitcoin back. And what's more, I have to deposit roughly around about 50% of what I put in the extra. So not only do I lose the money that I put in, I lose more than what you paid me. So if you pay me the dollars, if I run away, you just say, well, you never got the dollars, and then you never get the Bitcoin, I never get the Bitcoin. It's more or less just lost. But everything's good. You say, yes, I got the Bitcoin. I say, yep, it got sent. And then you receive the Bitcoin and everyone's happy. So there's slightly more complicated than that. There's a few more bits and pieces, but that's more or less how BISC works, right? So it's a way that we can trustlessly send money without having to meet up in person, and that enables electronic payments and other ways, a way to get around doing it. So that's
amazing. I think one of my contacts was also mentioning to me a website, I think it's called privatebitcoin.com. I don't know if you know about it.
I haven't actually. No.
Okay, but it's kind of a similar platform that connects private buyers and sellers of Bitcoin, maybe other cryptos as well, but I think definitely, no, I think it's called localbitcoin.com.
Local Bitcoins, yeah. The problem with local Bitcoins now is that you need to submit ID to use it.
I see, so it's not, whereas this application BISC is private.
The reason that is local Bitcoins is a company run by people, and so at some point, the government came along and said, well, hold on, you're technically a money transmitter, so therefore you need to register, collect, know your customer information, etc. But when using BISC, there's not actually a company running it. It's just a way for people to connect with each other, just like BitTorrent or Bitcoin itself, in a way that's trustless, that allows you to negotiate the kind of stuff, but also handle the idea of people getting ripped off, right?
Right.
So that's what BISC is. Now, another one is a company called HODL HODL. that runs a similar kind of model, but it is in a more decentralized manner, so they don't have the issues that local Bitcoins does. So HODL.
Just HODL.
Correct. Yeah, I think HODL-HODL.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's kind of like local Bitcoins, but more decentralized. The way they've structured it is that they technically aren't a money service provider, but the advantage that might be for some people is it's a website. It's easier to use than BISC, perhaps because it's the software is not quite as scary for someone that's a complete computer noob or whatever. But HODL is very similar, where you can list a buy or sell in whatever form you like, cash, PayPal, transfer, Revolut, whatever it is that floats your boat. Buyer and seller gets connected up, uses a similar sort of escrow system where that's it's sent to an address to prevent someone ripping someone off. And again, there's no need to exchange any sort of KYC information or data or anything like that there. So that's another way. So those three are the main ways that I suggest. The other two that you can look at are mining, which is kind of very expensive and difficult for people. But, for example, you can buy a miner, for around about, nowadays, I think probably you're looking at a couple of grand. That's going to probably take you about 6 months to a year to get some significant money out of it. But you just can leave this thing on, and you're basically turning electricity into Bitcoin or whatever it is you're mining progressively over time. And if you're mining, then that's completely private because it's just coming straight off the Bitcoin blockchain. You're not submitting any information to anyone anywhere. So mining is a way to do it. It's just kind of slow and noisy and et cetera, but that's a very private way to acquire Bitcoin. The last one is through your work. So I don't know, let's say you run an e-store and you sell cupcakes, offer Bitcoin as a payment method, right? And so the only person that knows that you got paid in Bitcoin was the person that paid you with that one there, and vice versa. So, if you have a job where you can offer Bitcoin as a payment method, maybe you need to offer a discount or something to incentivize people to want to use Bitcoin, but that's another very private way to acquire Bitcoin. So they're the main kind of ways I'd suggest to get your hands on Bitcoin without having to give your detail away to some other third party.
Interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned, through essentially accepting Bitcoin as a form of payment. I happen to know that there's at least one real estate developer here in Playa del Carmen that will accept Bitcoin as a form of payment for their condo projects, for example. Now I happen to find out that they don't keep the money in Bitcoin. They essentially they accept it as a facility to their clients, but then they quickly thereafter turn it into pesos or dollars, I guess, to take care of their various costs, right? But I mean, they would be that would be a way for them to directly and
exactly. I mean, there's plenty of, you could sell things secondhand for Bitcoin is another one. The best way, if you want to get a large amount of Bitcoin without any information, sell your house for Bitcoin, right? And apart from the real estate agent and the other person that pays you, no one has the record of that you acquired this Bitcoin and it went to this address. So I mean, hopefully you get the idea of there's some websites, but there's also plenty of ways, like I talked about there, about if you're smart and you've got something that's worth money that people will buy with Bitcoin. Now the classic one is like cars, right? Like a lot of people want to get a car. It's a nice high ticket item that you could sell for crypto. So sell that for Bitcoin, and then other people, that's a way that you can acquire it without having to submit your information to Coinbase or whatever it may be.
Got it. Now we've been speaking mostly about Bitcoin. Are there, and hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot, but are there? I keep hearing about these privacy coins. What's the difference between some of these coins and, let's say, Bitcoin? Bitcoin is the main coin everybody's heard of. What are these other coins attempting to do in order to protect your privacy that Bitcoin doesn't already do, if I may ask? Like, if you happen to know.
Sure. Look, I'm someone that believes pretty strongly that almost everything apart from Bitcoin is a complete waste of time, and most of them are here to steal your money, and they don't actually deliver on the promises that they say. That what we probably will talk about shortly is the other part of this, which is running and using your thing in a permissionless, decentralized manner, and almost everything else doesn't really do that on a real level. So I'll talk about that shortly. But when it comes to privacy coins, I think for a lot of them, you've got to be very skeptical about what they claim. There's been many, for example, one that was really popular, which I don't think is really around very much anymore, but the last bull run was this one called Verge that had made all sorts of promises about privacy, but really, the actual, if you understood what they were talking about, it did nothing. It was terrible. In fact, it's far worse than Bitcoin because people use it in a way where they're assuming that it's private, right? But really it's not. So I think that for the vast majority of them, they're garbage. And the problem with a lot of them is, as I've said, is that unless you really are able to assess the stuff properly, you're kind of going on the word of someone else, which for a lot of people, they don't really understand what they're talking about unless you're a cryptographer, you understand digital privacy with, particularly with digital currencies, then, quite potentially you're going to make a lot of mistakes with that. The one exception that, I'm a fan of and I think has a future is Monero. And I think that's relatively is when it comes to security, it's secure. But, in my opinion, I still think that Bitcoin is superior to all of those things. And there's a couple of reasons. One is, so if I'm using Monero, and I'm paying, I'm transferring around and then I want to sell it for dollars, right? Or I want to obtain some goods and services for it. So you have the same problem that you do with Bitcoin, whereby either I've got to turn it into cash, in which case I've got to generally KYC and send it to an exchange, in which case the privacy is more or less useless, right? Because you know that this has been sold by you, and so you got rid of that element of that. Or that I'm going to use it to sell. I'm going to buy a fridge with Monero, or buy a house or whatever, cupcakes, whatever it's for. Now it's difficult enough to find someone that accepts Bitcoin, but trying to find someone that's going to accept Monero for what you're doing is a whole nother level of difficulty. And this is the issue that almost every cryptocurrency, apart from Bitcoin, encounters, is that really I think it's economics that the market has a shelling point, if you like, or focuses towards the one thing, because why would I want the extra one, the other thing, if what everyone wants is the bigger one, right? Why would I want X, Y, Z other coin if everyone uses Bitcoin? If I have to switch into Bitcoin to sell it somewhere else, why would I want this extra step? I just want Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin itself is private if you acquire and you use it in a correct way. The difference with something like Monero is that you still have to acquire it in a private way, but the primary difference between Bitcoin and Monero is that what happens on chain. So I acquire the Bitcoin and then I send it to somewhere else, and pay someone at the end. Now you can't see that connection on chain when it comes to Monero, and you can with Bitcoin, right? Now, if you had acquired that Bitcoin with cash and you'd done that stuff, you could see exactly what had gone on chain, but that wouldn't really reveal anything, right?
Right.
So if you use Bitcoin in a correct way, that issue is largely mitigated. And I'm not going to say in every single circumstances, but for intents and purposes, for most people, that problem is solved. The other hiccup with that, though, that I found, which is very common, is that people assume they're using Monero, X, Y, Z Cash, whatever it is, and so they think that everything is private, but really they're making some fundamental mistakes along the way, which ruins that. So, for example, most people don't know or understand why it is important to use your own full node for any cryptocurrency whatsoever. So, if you're not running your own full node, you're running full node. Okay, so this is.
I'm not sure I know what that means. How do you what are you referring?
Full as in like a cup full of water, full, and node as in NODE.
Okay, what do you mean by that? I'm sorry, I have not familiar with the term.
So this is how Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies work, right? Is that you have a network of peers. So I'm running Bitcoin, you're running Bitcoin, someone else is running Bitcoin, right? And when a transaction happens, we send out that transaction to the network. Our software verifies that it's a valid transaction, looks at the blockchain and says, you've sent me 1 Bitcoin and I've sent you 0.2. So it looks at the blockchain, it says, yep, the amount was there. These digital signatures are valid. So this is a valid transaction. I'm going to accept that into the blockchain. or here's a block from a miner with all these other transactions. This is all valid. So yes, I accept it onto the blockchain, right?
Okay.
So that's how Bitcoin works. Is we're already running the software, and I don't have to trust anyone else because my software verifies that it's true, right? It does the work to prevent that I'm not getting cheated. No one's feeding me false information, and that this is legitimate, right? But if you're not running your own full node, and you are, and this is what is happening on most software wallets that people use, is they're not actually running a full node, they're running a light wallet. So let's say, for example, Exodus, right? Exodus doesn't have the blockchain for anything on its computer. What it does is you send a message to Exodus's server. So that Exodus is a company running computer servers. You send a message to them and says, hey, Exodus, can you please tell me, did this transaction happen? Can you please tell me how much Bitcoin is in this wallet? Here's a transaction. Would you please send it onwards? If they don't want to do that, or they want to send you whatever information, they can do that because you're totally trusting this third party to feed you that information, right? Wow. And so in that sense, you're no better off than PayPal or a bank or anything else, because that's exactly what happens when you log into your banking application. It sends an API request to the bank and says, hey, this is the person, how much money do they have in their bank? And the bank sends you back a number. You've got no way of knowing if they actually have that money in there, or if it's gone down or whatever. Or if they tell you that $100 gone out of your bank account, you've got no way to dispute that because you're just trusting the bank, right? That's the system. And so unless you are running your own full node, you are in no better a situation than, I mean, if your keys have been generated in a private way, yes, they can't steal your money, but you can't transact with a network and you can't trust the information that's being passed to you unless you're pulling that off your own computer that you're running yourself, which has a copy of the blockchain, if you understand what I'm...
Not really. Like, to be honest, like I thought that having your own wallet is, a secure way, and I thought it was pretty private, but it sounds like it's not fully private. Because
this is where many people go wrong. And again, it's the idea of running your own full node. It's not that difficult, and there's plenty of YouTube videos online to do it. And if you really want to do it, you can do it. But most people, it's confusing, it's complicated, so they take the easy to use route, and that's what they think is Bitcoin is using Exodus or something like that, when really what you're using there is you are trusting Exodus, using Exodus to talk to all these networks, right? But if Exodus says, sorry, you're banned, or we're not going to let serve you anymore, or whatever, then you still, as long as your keys have been generated in a private way, you have the money, but you can't talk to the network, right? You can't send or receive or get your balances. They can't steal your money, but you can't transact with anyone.
So Nacho, sorry, when you say unless your keys have been generated in a private way, I mean, most of us get our keys when we set up the wallet app. It just it is somehow the key gets auto-generated, so we don't have any control over that. So is there any other way to get your keys?
Well, this is it. Is if you are something like Exodus, for example, I don't recommend at all, because that's a closed source application. So what that means is that the code that's running on there, you can't view that. You can't go on GitHub and actually see the code that's being run, right?
Okay.
Whereas most of the wallets I recommend, Bitcoin Core, Electrum, Spectre Wallet, all these kind of ones like that.
Bitcoin. Let's get some name. Bitcoin
Core. So Bitcoin Core is the reference software.
C-O-R-E? C-O-R-E?
C-O-R-E, yeah.
Okay, and what was the other one you mentioned?
Electrum wallet.
Electrum, is that with the...
R-U-M.
E-L-E-K-T-R-U-M?
I can type this in the chat, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I should have been doing this before.
I was just about doing that. Okay. So are these open source wallets as opposed to...
Yeah. And there's many that are out there, but the thing is there are others like Exodus or many more that are closed source, and so you're effectively trusting that they're generating your keys in a private manner, but you don't know what's happening on that computer software, right? They could be, for all you know, they could be taking they could have a log of all your private keys and all your private information. Right. So even if you're not a programmer and you can't audit the code yourself, you can't look at it and say, I don't know about this. if it's open source, you can be very sure in this ecosystem, especially if it's one that's got a lot of use, that there are reliable people looking out there at this thing to find those sort of bugs. There's been many instances where these sort of things have been found, reported, or things have been pulled out. So an open source reputable software is one thing to make sure that your keys are generated in a private way, right? But I would say I wouldn't want anyone to trust me on this, but I think the idea of one of these, like stealing your keys, if it's a well-known big one, is relatively low. All things. So again, I wouldn't think off the top of my head. Again, not to say this is not impossible, but that something like Exodus is logging your private keys. But the biggest issue is that so you've got your keys, and if you want to retrieve your balances, you've got to send a request to Exodus that says, "Hey, Exodus, these are the addresses I want some information on. Can you tell me how much Bitcoin is in these addresses there?" So that's going to their servers, and I guarantee you there's a log there which is recording that this IP address and whatever other information they have about you requested this Bitcoin address and all the other ones in the future that they're going to use for the next 10, 20 addresses, and that log is sitting there waiting for someone, and law enforcement, I think, or any particular government entity is someone that could very well come and obtain this information. And the same thing goes about Ledger Live, Trezor Suite, any of these things that people relatively use to interact with Bitcoin. Is that
so
if you
even what we call a cold wallet like Trezor, like you'd have the same concern about, because it's still a private company. It's not open source.
100%, yes. So the difference between that and Bitcoin Core is that if you're running a full node, you download and keep all transactions that have ever happened in Bitcoin or whatever relevant crypto network you're talking about. And when I want to get those balances, I don't ask someone else. I look at my own ledger and I find that information somewhere buried. Okay, so this address, this transaction, yep, that's legit. And so I'm not actually asking anyone. No one can tell that I'm finding this information because it's all happening locally on my computer on the copy of the database that I own, that I've verified, right? So the only person I need to trust to be able to obtain information about balances is my computer, right? And the software that I'm running, not someone else.
Interesting. Okay,
so that means that not only is it more trustable because I don't need to rely, on a third party to feed me the information, but also I can know it's also very private because I'm not sharing with anyone that I'm interested in these particular addresses.
Got it. I want to say addresses. It's the particular your own addresses on your wallet, right? Where you may have Bitcoin or whatever other coins you have.
Correct.
But since the wallet is ultimately developed by a private company, that raises certain concerns that you've already shared. So I guess my question would be, not just a lot of people are, when they first get started in the crypto space, they probably used a wallet like Exodus or one of the popular ones, not knowing about, not even considering that, there's this third party that actually knows potentially what you have in there. And so let's say somebody has money right now on one of these wallets. If they were to download, let's say, Bitcoin Core or one of the other ones, you mentioned Electrum being the other one, can you still use the same seed phrase that you were, let's say, assigned when you started, let's say, your Exodus wallet, to now open this new wallet and maybe consider transferring whatever balances you had on the Exodus wallet to the new private wallet?
I mean, you could even import use those. Let's say you've got 24 words. You could just import those 24 words into Electrum or Bitcoin Core or anything like that, and use it directly like that. But again, once they know that information, they know that you've got that, right? And even if you are to send that on to another address, you can still follow the breadcrumbs. All this kind of stuff, right? So this is the concern when it comes to cryptocurrencies, to kind of come back to what we talked about at the start, is that they can be used in a private way, but unless you follow correct data hygiene, let's say, then they can be easy to surveil and to follow. Now, that's not to say to everyone that all hope is lost and that you can't trace that information on. For example, if I was to send a transaction to two new addresses, let's say I split in half, hard for you to tell which one of those, that could easily be a payment for that amount to someone else, and the rest could be my change. Which one is a payment? Which one is my change? Going forward, is this splits into other addresses or goes down, et cetera, et cetera? There are ways that you can kind of discern this, but you can never know for certain about, where this information, where this has gone, how it's moved down the food chain, and who actually owns this amount at this particular point in time. So, even initiating a transfer gives you some degree of increased security, but it's something to think about going forward. And again, I think privacy is important, but what's most important is to have the Bitcoin on your own hardware wallet or on your own computer, not on Coinbase or whatever. Because what you have on Coinbase, Binance, and these places is you got a promise for Bitcoin, right? You got a thing where you got an account and they say, we owe you 10 Bitcoin. But if they don't want to send you that 10 Bitcoin, or sorry, there's been a delay, or we need to investigate your account for whatever, they can just not send you it, right? And what are you going to do? You
so in other words, do not keep your Bitcoin or other cryptos on an exchange. Get it off on an exchange. And again, in terms of, you mentioned like a hard wallet, can you recommend one that would be, open source? Because the two that are most popular are Ledger and Trezor, but those are not open source as far as I know.
No, they both are. They're both open source. Ledger has Trezor and Ledger are both open source, and they're both not bad choices either. Ledger has what's called a closed source element, so there's a chip on there which is closed source. Part of that though is that these chips, and that's part of their security model. If it was open source, anyone could copy it and sell it, and so part of that's to do with IP things. But it is a concern with Ledger where potentially there could be some secret magic going on there which could steal your money one day. It's not impossible. So for that reason, I'm kind of more of a fan of Trezor than Ledger. For me, the one that I recommend the most, just posted it in the thing here, is Cold Card, which is by a Canadian company, which I talked to you about before, that makes those little open dimes. Same thing. They make this one is a hardware wallet. And I really recommend these guys called Coin Kites. They make amazing stuff.
Cold Card.
Cold Card. Yeah. Cold Card. Yeah, exactly like that. Yeah. So that, in my opinion, is the best hardware wallet to use. It's it's a little bit more complicated, not super more complicated, but it's a little bit more complicated than the others. But one of the biggest advantages of Cold Card is that it's got a lot of really, really cool, really good security features. But one of the really good ones is, for example, that it's possible to use your Cold Card without ever connecting it to the internet. So if you use Trezor or Ledger, right, you need to at least plug it in to start the device. And generally speaking, to interact with your wallet, you need to connect it to the computer and then send the stuff over. So with Cold Card, you can create your 24 words on the device. You plug it into like a power bank, that you have for your phone. You plug it into that, so it's got power. You create it on the device, then you put it in an SD card, and you can create what's called like a watch-only wallet, which you can then put into Electrum. And so then Electrum has that, and it can create the transaction, and it will spit it out onto the SD card again in a way where everything's there. You just need to sign it. You put that back into your Cold Card on the SD card, press sign, it does the magic stuff, and then copies it back out, and you plug it into your computer. So it never has to actually connect to the internet, or never has to actually interface directly with your computer. And when it comes to, this is like a small kind of extreme edge case thing, but when it comes to vulnerabilities, there's a lot more potentials when it comes to USB versus SD cards. And the fact that it's never connected directly to the internet is, again, the way that you should really treat anything of this nature if you're really concerned about privacy and security. So Cold Card is what I really recommend. It is all open source, and I think it's the best one out there. But again, Trezor and Ledger are good options too, and I certainly don't want to discourage anyone from those. But that's if you're really serious about your crypto and you've got more than a couple $100, you should be investing in one of those things to keep it on.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that. So Nacho, you've given us quite a few you've given us quite a bit of advice today in terms of ways that you can, number one, acquire your Bitcoin privately. and also store it in safe ways, or rather, and I understand that Bitcoin is actually stored in the blockchain, but at least in terms of how you access it, there are options that I think many people don't even know about that actually would be more private than perhaps some of the popular, let's say, wallet apps that people are using.
Just one thing on that, if I would just close it out, what I wanted to say about, say, Monero is that, so Monero is more private than Bitcoin, like on chain, like I talked about before. But so now you understand the difference between a light wallet and a full node. Now, if I use Monero I buy it with cash, or I buy it off an exchange, but then I send it to somewhere else, and say go buy it, join a weed with it, right? Now, if I've been using a mobile phone wallet, which isn't a full node, which has been communicating with some server and that there, you're really no better than Bitcoin. In fact, you're worse, because just like I talked about before, yes, you're using Monero, but it's got a log of this address sent this data to this address from this IP address at this time, and all those transactions that have gone through on your your mobile wallet are logged in a server somewhere. You can't see it on the blockchain, but it's sitting on a computer somewhere that someone can go and knock on the door and get their information on, right? And so in that sense, you kind of ruin the privacy that comes from that privacy coin. And that's even worse if you're operating in a way where you think you don't need to worry about this stuff, and so you don't take the sort of precautions that you should take. So so that's just to reel back and cover that off, because that's kind of, we started it. That's why running your own full node, having your own source of truth that you trust yourself, is really, really important for that there. And what I'll do as well, before we knock this off, I'll just throw out a couple of links about anyone that's interested in this kind of stuff, which especially if you're like, well, this is super complicated, where do I start? I'll give you a couple of links. One's a really good video guide on starting your own full node. And there's a couple of software packages now that do that in a way which is really easy for you to do as an individual, even if you're not really sharp with computers. And the other one's a couple of sources where you can read a lot more information and stuff.
Have you been typing any comments into StreamYard? Because I haven't seen any of your comments. I only see my own. Go ahead, try to type something.
I just typed in, I've only typed in Electrum, Cold Card, and Bitcoin Core is anything I put in.
For some reason, I'm not seeing your comments on there.
It's in private. I got it in private chat. That'll be why. You can't see the private chat?
No. No, can you put them in the public chat? Oh, private chat, I see.
I don't think I put it in the comments. I think you might have to copy them over for me. I can just see what you've written there.
I saw them. Yeah, I saw Electrum Wallet. Okay, I see. Yeah. I saw it in private chat. Can you put it in the comments?
Sure. Okay, so the first one I'm going to paste in for you now is
so I hate
this one here. If I can get the link, sorry, 1 second. Here we go. So this one here is a really good guide on how to set up and run your own full node. And this is using a piece of software called MyNode. And this is designed for people that where you're like, oh my God, how do I do any of this kind of stuff? Where you just like basically flash this thing onto an SD card. You plug it into what's called a Raspberry Pi, which is a cheap computer you can buy off Amazon or wherever for like $80. And then this thing does all the magic for you, and you've got your own little private Bitcoin computer. And that's what I recommend people do, because then it keeps...
Is this the link that you posted?
Yep, that's the one there. Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna also post that in the comments for people, because like in the comments to the video, because I don't think these comments are gonna show for too long, but yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
So that's what I really recommend is if you're interested in running your own full node, you know what I'm talking about makes sense to you, but you're like, where do I start? What do I do? Get something like MyNode. Follow this really easy to follow guide here from BTC Sessions, another Canadian guy that I really recommend, and he's got some really good videos on all this kind of stuff that I've talked about as well. If you're looking at digging a bit deeper, I really recommend this guy's guide videos. They're very good for people that maybe the stuff's a bit new and scary.
Okay.
So the next one is, just pulling it up now, is the Bitcoin Guide to Privacy.
Bitcoin guide to Privacy. Okay.
Yes. So this one here is a really good guide on the basics of just like securing, sourcing, segregating, scrutinizing, all the S's that you need about privacy and Bitcoin. So this is a really good, again, step-by-step guide where you want to learn more about this, but like, oh my God, where do I start? What do I do? This had some really good 101 tips about how to do this stuff properly.
And bitcoiner.guide.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna just put that in the comments also. Okay, and again, I'll make sure this is also in the comments to the YouTube video so that people can check that out later.
And here's the last one I'll give you. Now this one here, this is very deep and very thick and very complicated. But if you want like the best answers, you know, the expert answers and all this kind of stuff, this one here, which is the Bitcoin Wiki, en.bitcoin.it/privacy. Again, it's complicated. You'll probably read it and you're like, oh my God, where do I start or whatever. But I recommend if you're interested in learning more about this, just keep chipping away at this and coming back to it and getting your head around how it works. This is, you know, top of the best guys in the business information about how to use Bitcoin in a private way. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. No, I really appreciate that, Nacho, and I know you're somebody that's passionate about our freedoms, including our freedom to transact, digital freedom, and ways that we can take back the power, you know, from what I like to call the powers not to be. So absolutely, yeah. So this is absolutely great. I really appreciate it, Nacho. And again, you some of this stuff for people who are new in the space may seem a bit overwhelming, but you know what? I'm going to post those things to the resources in the comments, and people can dive deeper into that. You've already given us some good tips in terms of some of these alternative wallets, and again, yeah, somebody says thank you very much. Yeah,
thank you.
Very welcome. Thank you, Nacho. And tell us where can people find you in case you know they want to connect to someone like yourself who knows a lot about this space. Is it CoinSure? You said CoinSure NZ?
Yeah, on Twitter.
Okay.
Which is where kind of most of my Bitcoin stuff goes on. Hold on, just post you the link here.
Okay.
Geez, sorry, 1 second.
I can just, that's it right there.
Yeah, that's it there. Just posted you the Twitter.
Oh, right on. You know what, let me just, I'll post that as well. Awesome, okay. Okay, well, I don't want to make this much longer. Thank you so much. Yeah. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today. Nacho, I will say, if people want to reach out to you, obviously, you know, it's a pleasure always connecting with you at the Playa Crypto meetups. But I know not everybody watching is in Playa, but this is a way for them to reach out to you. And again, I will post the links to the resources. Thank you so much again for sharing some of these insights with us and kind of doing something good in the world, you know, educating people about ways we can safeguard our privacy in this new world of digital currencies. And with Bitcoin being, you know, the main one that people are getting into. Any closing words, anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to say thank you very much for having me on. And the last thing is for a lot of people, you know, if you're interested in using this stuff in a much more private way, and kind of like I hopefully talked about at the start about why that's important, probably the most important thing I just want to leave it with is you might look at this and think, oh, this is too hard. I've made so many mistakes. Why even bother? The most important thing is not to be perfectly private, even though that's what you want to be striving for, but just be a little bit better than you were before every day, right? It's not possible in any authoritarian society for the government to control what everyone does. It's just
as much as they may try.
Yeah, as much as they may try. It's just trying to make things as difficult and as complicated and as hard for them, so that it's not just a matter of 3 clicks and they know where you are. It's a long, complicated kind of process. And the more that you can tie people up in knots and waste their time and energy with this kind of stuff, the more that it eventually becomes impossible to do at scale. So you might be able to get 1 or 2 or 3 people, but if more and more people just do take some small steps becomes exponentially harder at scale to do this stuff to everyone, right? So again, what I might have given you with some of these links, you might be looking and think, oh my God, this is so complicated. Just chew it away a little bit over time. Every little thing you do will make a difference for you and for society in general. But also what's most important about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general is that they are about self-sovereignty, right? We need to get out of the model of like being a lazy consumer who trusts your bank or your company to do all the work for you. You've got to get off your own ass and read the stuff and do the hard work to own it, right? You can't have convenience and self-sovereignty for yourself. And so part of the stuff is just spending a little bit every day, every week, every month, spending more time to kind of expand your sovereignty bubble, if you like, expending more energy and having more control over your money and many other things beyond this. So seeing it as something that you chip away, it's an endurance event rather than like, oh my God, this is too hard, I'll never be able to do it. Just every try and make a little bit of progress and learn more the more that you go. And hopefully the links that I've given you will give you some real eye-openers about the right sort of questions you should be asking about the stuff going forward. Thank
you. And actually, I just kind of in closing, there's a book that you've recommended and I started listening to it. Thank you very much, Nacho. Can you could you mention it to our audience as well? I think it's called The Sovereign.
The Sovereign Individual. Yeah.
The Sovereign Individual.
Let me just get you I'll just get you the Amazon link because that's what everyone seems to, as much as I really don't want to be shilling Amazon or here. Let me just see if I can get you the link because it's good.
I'm really enjoying it. It's fascinating book about what cryptocurrencies could do for us in terms of really helping us take back the power over our financial system or over our finances in a way we've never had before. Especially for something that was written in 1997. It's an amazing, amazingly prophetic book. Visionary, visionary.
Yeah. I highly recommend everyone reads this book, and I think I read this before COVID happened, and I think if you read it now, it's everything they talked about has been accelerated massively in the last year about where the world at the moment. It doesn't look like it's going that way, but I think if you read the book and you understand, you can see this is where the world will go. So I really recommend this book. That's amazing. Thank you. I'm going to post a link to that book as well. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you, Nacho, again for your time and your early Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. I look forward to keeping in touch, and I encourage anybody in our audience who is passionate about this topic, feel free to connect with Nacho via Twitter. And thanks everyone for watching, and look forward to seeing you on future editions of Money Matters. Okay, take care. Bye for now.